My stepdaughter yelled that I was nobody in her life and had no right to interfere. I returned the tickets to her concert, took back the jewelry I'd given her, and stopped handing her cash. Her father didn't even respond to her message. Subscribe and leave your story in the comments. Time to jump right in. You're nobody in my life, and you should stay out of it. That's what she told me. Her face twisted, her eyes sharp with a hatred I never thought could belong to the child I raised. It's strange how one sentence, spat like venom, can unravel years of labor. My name is Alex. I am 43 years old, and I have lived most of my adult life under an illusion that if you pour enough of yourself into someone else's child, they will eventually see you as more than a placeholder. They will look at you and know that you chose them when their real father didn't. They will understand the quiet sacrifices. They will recognize love when it bleeds. I believed that for years. God help me, I built my life around that belief. When I married Lindsay, her daughter Sophia was 7 years old. A small thing with dark hair, missing teeth, and a habit of clinging to her mother's side. Her father, Mark, was a ghost who drifted in and out whenever the calendar gave him an excuse. A Christmas toy here, a birthday card there. Always with a smile, always with charm, but never with substance. Never the man a child needed. So I became that man. I told myself I would give Sophia everything Mark could not. Not because I wanted to erase him, but because I wanted her to have what she deserved. Consistency. A roof that never leaked, meals that never failed, school clothes that fit. I worked overtime shifts, drove home in the dead of night, and counted every bill twice to make sure there was enough. And always there was enough because I made it enough. The little things add up. People forget that. It wasn't only tuition checks or the big gestures. It was new sneakers when hers wore down faster than I could track. It was private tutoring when she struggled in math, because I couldn't stand to watch her cry over homework. It was dance classes, horseback riding, swimming lessons, activities she begged for, things Lindsay said we couldn't afford, but I made possible anyway. Every summer I sent her to camp because she wanted to go where her friends went. I paid for trips abroad with her school because she said it wasn't fair to be the only one left behind. I bought her jewelry for birthdays, a car when she turned 16, the kind of gifts that make a teenager feel seen, valued, special. All of it, every cent, came from me. Mark, meanwhile, would reappear every now and then with the same tired routine. A weekend of fun, promises spoken with champagne ease, and then, gone again. Sophia would glow for days after his visits, bragging about the dinners, the outings, the little trinkets he handed her. And then she would sink back into the life I maintained, without ever noticing who kept the lights on. But I noticed every time. I told myself patience was the answer, that love is slow, that trust is built brick by brick. For years I believed my consistency would be the difference. I believed that one day, she would look at me not as her mother's husband, not as the man who wrote checks, but as her father in truth. I clung to that belief through every cold silence at the dinner table, through every moment when she talked about Mark like he was a king returning from battle, through every cruel laugh when she joked to her friends that I was just the wallet. I stayed. I gave. Do you understand what it means to give like that? To pour your time, your money, your energy into someone who barely acknowledges your existence? To spend years hoping for a word, a glance, some sign that you matter, not as a provider but as a person? I told myself it would come, that she was young, that she didn't understand yet, that one day, when she was grown, she would see the truth of who really raised her. That day never came. Instead, the older she grew, the clearer the gap became. She began to emphasize her real father more and more. She spoke of Mark with a reverence she never once gave me. And little by little, the distance between us widened into a canyon. But I didn't stop. When she needed help with her college applications, I stayed up with her until dawn, editing essays, filling out forms. When she needed a deposit for her first apartment, I transferred it without hesitation. When Lindsay's voice cracked with worry about bills, I assured her we would manage, because I would make sure we managed. Every piece of Sophia's stability rested on my back. And yet, despite all of it, Despite years of unrelenting effort, all it took was one sharp sentence to erase me entirely. You're nobody in my life, and you should stay out of it. Do you know what that feels like? To have your very existence as a father denied, not by the man who abandoned her, but by the child you raised in his place. To have everything you built, the money, the effort, the sacrifices brushed away like dust from a table? It's not anger that comes first. It's not even sorrow. It's a hollowing, a silence that spreads inside your chest until you feel like a ghost in your own home. And in that silence, the truth finally settled. I was not her father. Not in her eyes. Not in Lindsay's either, not really. I was a means, a structure, a man who paid, who stood in the shadows while another was idolized. I had invested everything, but the return never came. Mark returned like a storm no one had predicted. No warning, no slow buildup of clouds on the horizon, just thunder cracking through a calm sky. One day he was gone, a name spoken in the past tense, a memory in Sophia's stories. The next, he was here, larger than life, smiling with that same careless charm that had once fooled Lindsay, and now dazzled the girl I had raised. He didn't come back to shoulder responsibility. He came back to play hero. And Sophia, hungry for the fantasy of a father who had never been there, gave him the crown without question. Started small. Dinner outings, shopping trips, a surprise appearance at her school events. He brought flowers once, I remember, delivered to the house not for Lindsay but for Sophia. A bright bouquet, tied with a ribbon, with a note that read, "From Dad." No other explanation needed. No mention of the years he'd been absent. No acknowledgement of the man who had been filling the void. Sophia's eyes lit up when she held those flowers, and mine dimmed. I watched the shift unfold, slow but relentless. She began dropping his name into conversations more and more. Dad took me to this restaurant. Dad said he'll get me a new phone. Dad thinks I should look at this college instead. Each time, the word hit like a nail being driven into the coffin of everything I had built. I stayed silent at first. What could I say? That I was the one who paid for the very car she drove to those dinners? That while Mark played benefactor, I was still covering her tuition, her rent, her endless needs. To say it aloud would make me sound bitter, petty, like a jealous stepfather who couldn't stand competition. But inside I was boiling. It didn't take long for her attitude toward me to sour completely. Where once she had tolerated me, now she mocked me. Subtle at first. A rolled eye when I spoke, a sigh when I asked something of her. Then sharper. At gatherings, she introduced me not as her father, not even as a stepfather, but as my mom's husband. 3 words, clean and clinical, designed to cut me out of her life with surgical precision. And Lindsay, she said nothing. She heard it. She saw the way Sophia's tongue turned sharper, the way she leaned harder into Mark's shadow. But my wife's silence was its own kind of betrayal. She wanted peace, not truth. She wanted her daughter happy, even if it meant letting her spit in my face. The breaking point came one night. Sophia had just returned from one of her weekends with Mark. She breezed through the door, perfume and laughter still clinging to her. I asked her to take out the trash. Nothing heavy, nothing unreasonable. She stopped in her tracks, turned to me, and screamed, "You're nobody in my life, and you should stay out of it." Lindsay was in the kitchen, frozen mid-step. The words ricocheted off the walls and cut me open. Sophia stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind her. And my wife, my partner, said nothing. No correction, no defense, just silence. That silence was worse than the scream. After that, something in me broke. I had endured cold shoulders, disrespect, indifference, but this was a declaration of war. Sophia had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. Still, I tried once more to salvage the wreckage. I reached out to Mark himself, hoping that beneath the bravado, he might recognize the damage his sudden return was causing. I messaged him, asked to talk about Sophia's future, to coordinate, to share responsibility like adults should. He never responded. Not once. That told me everything I needed to know. Mark hadn't returned to be a father. He had returned to be adored. and he would keep playing the role until it grew inconvenient again. He knew nothing of tuition bills, of insurance premiums, of rent payments and emergency room visits. Those burdens were invisible to him, because he had never carried them. But I had. And now, with one sentence, "You're nobody," Sophia had made clear she preferred the man who gave her glitter to the man who gave her structure. She wanted fantasy over reality, illusions over labor. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint buzz of her laughter upstairs as she texted Mark. My jaw ached from clenching. My fists tightened at my sides. And in the hollow dark, I realized my years of investment had bought me nothing but contempt. All I had left was the choice of whether to keep paying for the privilege of being erased. The night she screamed at me, I still thought there might be a way back. I told myself teenagers are cruel, that their words are sharpened by immaturity, not truth. I swallowed my anger, I buried the sting, and I told myself to wait. But the waiting turned to rot. The next morning I drove Sophia to school. She sat in the passenger seat, scrolling her phone, laughing at messages from Mark. Not a glance in my direction, not a word of thanks when she stepped out. I watched her walk away, head high, shoulders proud, as if I were nothing more than her chauffeur. When she reached the door, she turned back, just for a moment. And with a smirk, she waved her phone at me and said, "Dad's picking me up later. You don't have to bother." It was then I realized my labor had become a joke in her mouth. That day, I went home and opened the drawer where I kept every receipt, every bill, every bank statement. Years of sacrifice lined up in neat rows, evidence of the life I had built for her. The car lease in my name, the summer camp invoices, the private tutoring contracts, jewelry purchases for birthdays, tickets for concerts, deposits for trips abroad. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, all mine. And for what? To be called Mom's husband. To be told I was nobody. The rage boiled clean. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. My revenge wasn't chaos, it was order. First, I returned the concert tickets I had bought for her next performance. She would go without me in the audience. My clapping hands, my quiet support. They would no longer be hers. Next, I opened her jewelry box while she was at school. The necklace I had given her for her birthday, the bracelet from her graduation, I took them back. Not because I needed them, but because she had stripped them of meaning. What's the worth of a gift to someone who spits on the giver? Finally, I shut down the flow of cash. No more allowance. No more last-minute transfers when she ran out of gas money. No more cards tucked with bills when she begged for just a little extra. The faucet was closed. Lindsay noticed first. She came into the kitchen holding the returned tickets, her brow furrowed. "Alex, what's this?" My voice was steady. "I'm done. No more gifts. No more money. Not until she learns respect." Her lips parted, shocked. "She's just a teenager. She doesn't mean what she says." I laughed, cold, humorless. She meant it enough to shout it in my face. She meant it enough to introduce me to her friends as nobody. She meant it when she chose Mark over me. Lindsay set the tickets on the counter, her hands trembling. "You're overreacting. She needs stability, not punishment." I looked her in the eye and asked, "Whose stability do you mean? Hers or yours?" She had no answer, but Sophia did. When she realized the money had stopped, her fury was immediate. She stormed into the living room, waving her phone at me like a wee *P***N. "Why didn't my transfer come through? I told you I needed gas money." I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm as ice. "You'll have to ask your real dad for that." The silence that followed was thick, poisonous. Her face flushed red, her jaw quivered. Then she spat at the floor. Not words, not insults, but actual spit, as if to mark the space between us with contempt. She turned and stormed upstairs, slamming her door so hard the frame shook. That was the last thread snapping. I decided then to face Mark directly. I called him, left a message, told him we needed to talk about Sophia's future, about how her expenses should be shared. Days passed. No reply. Weeks passed. Nothing. It was confirmation of what I had known all along. His return was smoke and mirrors, dinners and promises, gifts designed to dazzle a child while reality rotted beneath her feet. Responsibility was not his language. He spoke only in illusions. And Sophia? She believed him. She believed him because believing him meant rejecting me. It was easier to worship the absentee father than to acknowledge the man who paid every bill. It was easier to choose fantasy than gratitude. So I chose something too. I chose myself. I would no longer be the invisible engine powering her comfort. I would no longer sacrifice while being mocked in my own home. I would no longer pay for the privilege of being erased. From that moment on, Sophia's life changed. The rides, the money, the gifts, all gone. Lindsay watched in disbelief as the weight of responsibility shifted back onto her shoulders. She had never truly seen how much I carried until I dropped it. She had never noticed how much of Sophia's life ran on my labor until it stopped. And Sophia, for the first time, felt the edges of reality pressing in. The concerts she couldn't attend. The friends she couldn't keep up with. The little luxuries that vanished overnight. She blamed me, of course. She screamed. She sulked. She hurled insults. But beneath it all was a truth she couldn't deny. The man she called nobody had been the foundation of everything she loved, and I had finally stopped being used. When I cut the money, it was like shutting off the oxygen in the house. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was suffocation. Sophia had built her entire world on the foundation of my labor, and when I pulled it away, the cracks spread fast. The first week, she brushed it off. She stormed through the halls, slamming doors, declaring that she didn't need me, that Mark would cover everything. "My real dad will take care of it," she said with a sneer, as if the words themselves could conjure him into reliability. I said nothing. I didn't have to. I knew what she didn't. Mark had always been a mirage. By the second week, the complaints began. No gas money, no shopping trips, no easy transfers to cover her nights out. She started leaning on Lindsay, expecting her to pick up the slack. My wife tried, she truly did. She shifted money from one envelope to another, juggling bills, stretching paychecks thinner than paper. But Lindsay had never carried the load alone. She didn't understand the weight until it pressed down on her. I watched her hands tremble as she filled out checks for Sophia's rent. I heard her voice crack when she told her daughter that new clothes would have to wait. For the first time, she saw the math. For the first time, she realized that without me, the arithmetic of their lives didn't add up. And Sophia? Her defiance began to rot into desperation. She complained less, sulked more. Her tone shifted from arrogant to pleading, but never with me. She begged her mother for money, begged her friends for help. Still, not a word of acknowledgement crossed her lips in my direction. Not once did she say, "Alex, I see what you did for me. I see what I threw away." She couldn't. Her pride was the last thing she had left, and she clung to it like a drowning child clutching a sinking branch. One night, I heard her crying through the walls. Quiet at first, then ragged, desperate sobs muffled by a pillow. Lindsay went to her, stroked her hair, whispered comfort. I stayed where I was, sitting in the dark, listening. Not because I enjoyed it, God, no. Because it was the sound of truth settling in. The truth that love without respect is slavery. The truth that I had been a slave in my own house. And now, finally, I was free. Lindsay tried to mediate, of course. She sat across from me at the kitchen table one morning, her eyes hollow with fatigue. "Alex," she said softly, "she's just a child. She doesn't understand what she's done. Can't you forgive her? Can't you help her? Just until she gets on her feet again." I looked at my wife, the woman I had once believed would be my partner in everything, and I saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't asking me to forgive. She was asking me to return to servitude. She was asking me to keep carrying a burden that spat on me while it grew fat from my labor. "No," I said simply. Her lips trembled. "You're punishing her for being young." I shook my head. "I'm punishing her for being cruel. There's a difference." She flinched, as if the word itself cut her. And maybe it did, because Lindsay knew deep down that she had allowed it. She had stood by while Sophia dismissed me, insulted me, erased me. She had traded my dignity for her daughter's approval, and now she wanted me to pay the bill again. But I was done paying. Sophia's world shrank quickly after that. Without my money, her college trips became impossible. Her friends began to leave her behind, tired of covering for her when she couldn't keep up. The car I had bought her sat in the driveway more often, half empty on gas she couldn't afford. The jewelry box I had emptied remained bare, a silent reminder of how quickly luxury disappears when the hand that gives it closes. And I felt lighter. Each day without a transfer, without a bill in her name, was a day I reclaimed a piece of myself. Each time she looked at me with fury or desperation, I felt no guilt, only clarity. The clarity that I had been raising a child who was never mine, for a wife who never defended me, in a house where I was treated as invisible until the money ran dry. One evening, Sophia finally broke. She cornered me in the hallway, her eyes red, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you ruining my life?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The girl I had once bought ice cream for after school. The teenager I had stayed up with editing college essays. The young woman I had driven across states for, dropping her off at campus with her dorm filled with things I paid for. And all I felt was distance. "Because you told me I was nobody," I said quietly. "And I believed you." Her face crumpled, confusion and rage twisting together. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. She turned and fled, slamming her bedroom door so hard it rattled the frame. Lindsay came to me later, her voice sharp with accusation. "She's breaking, Alex. She's falling apart. Can't you see that?" "I see it," I replied. "And it's not my problem anymore." That was the realization. Not the anger, not the betrayal, not even the rejection. The realization was colder than all of that. I no longer owed them anything. Not Sophia, not Lindsay, not even myself. Because debt only exists where there is love and respect. Without those, all that remains is servitude. And I had finally walked free of my chains.